A 105-mile-long mirrored city in the desert. 9 million people living in 2 skyscrapers stretching across the sand. No cars, no roads, no pollution. But costs have exploded. Plans have been quietly scaled back, and what was meant to house millions may only hold a fraction of that. They call it the line, but it could be the most expensive illusion of the 21st century. They promised people could move in by 2025, but the real problem wasn't ambition. It was everything else. The desert is fighting back, and it might be winning. Unlike past blue sky projects, this one seemed serious. Saudi Arabia looked like a world leader in innovation. The line was designed for 9 million people, more than the city of Chicago, in a space smaller than Manhattan. Early plans envisioned robot construction, drone deliveries, and AI predicting everyone's schedule. But experts quickly spotted problems. To cross end to end in 20 minutes, trains would need to go faster than 300 miles an hour. Add in stops and crowds, and congestion becomes inevitable. Elevators posed another headache. Moving 9 million people up and down giant skyscrapers would create 30-minute waits, turning this futuristic vision into a logistical nightmare. And that's not the only issue. The building would be locked in a constant fight with nature. Strong winds would rock the entire structure. The 120-degree desert heat could warp or crack the mirrored surfaces. And then there's the sandstorms. They could scratch the surface, shutting down solar panels. And that's before we even get to the birds. Millions migrate through the area every year. A giant glass wall could kill over 2 million each season. Even the hanging skyscraper design was a problem. Pumping waste and water that high would eat up as much electricity as an entire power plant. Experts warned that a straight line is the worst possible shape for a city. Early studies suggested just cooling the city would demand twice the energy of New York City. There was the opportunity to change the plans, to make the line shorter or wider, but they stuck to their vision. And that meant making the same mistakes they had on other projects. The Red Sea Resort, launched in 2017, promised sustainability and eco-credentials, but it damaged the very reefs it promised to protect. The line faced even bigger challenges. It relied on technology that hadn't even been invented yet. And if you like these geography deep dives, hit subscribe. Unlike the line, I hope this project will actually succeed. The flaws were more than enough to raise doubts about the line. Construction kicked off in 2022, and that's when serious problems emerged. Satellite images revealed massive trenches, with enough dirt being moved to recreate the Empire State Building thousands of times over. The plans promised floating docks, vertical farms, and even robot dinosaurs. The hype attracted top engineering firms, but once on site, they discovered the sand was unstable, doubling construction time. Supplying water and power to the city increased costs by 50%. And then came the tech issues. The self-driving shuttles for 9 million people didn't work in real tests. The high-tech farms were useless because they couldn't get enough light. And it wasn't the first disaster either. Remember the billion-dollar LIV Gulf tour or the WeWork scandal? The line was a similar high-stakes gamble dependent on technologies that might never materialize, along with wasting massive amounts of time and energy. The trains they wanted to use were based on a company that went out of business. Even the computer models showed that the stations would be too crowded to move people. The indoor farms had problems with the desert's humidity, meaning they couldn't grow enough food. Saudi Arabia spent billions on research, but the costs still exploded. Every solution, from mirrored walls meant to generate solar power to AI-driven desalination, they backfired, creating more pollution than it solved. Water plants threatened fish and coral in the Red Sea. Pipes wasted energy, and salty runoff killed marine life. Each eco-friendly promise only made the project costlier and more destructive. It was also claimed that they would protect the local wildlife. Yet the massive wall cuts right through the migration routes of animals like the Arabian oryx, putting rare populations at risk. Even the so-called wildlife bridges were problematic. Many animals simply wouldn't cross something that unnatural. The 2023 reports meant to prove sustainability ended up showing the opposite. And the line isn't the only warning sign. Trojena, a ski resort in the desert, required so much water that nearby plant life began dying and electricity usage rivaled the consumption of millions of homes. Saudi Arabia has repeatedly pushed these eco-narratives to get global praise, but greenwashing is a short-term strategy with long-term consequences, and this project is becoming a liability for everyone tied to it. And then there's the human cost. According to multiple reports, the human cost has been severe. Around 20,000 members of the Huaytat tribe were forced out of their homes to clear land for the project. When residents protested, the response was swift and brutal. Shootings, harsh prison sentences, and even reports of death penalties. Critics say Saudi Arabia has carried out relocations on a scale far greater than neighboring countries. 100,000 workers were also brought in from other countries. Some reports claimed that at least 21,000 workers have died across major Saudi projects since 2016, though exact figures are disputed. By 2024, reports of abuse had surged. While labor issues exist on other projects, the scale here is unprecedented. Official statements label deaths as accidents, but that's met with a degree of skepticism by human rights groups. But what about the finances? This is where the grand vision met reality. The money problems were clear from the start, signaling that the line might be financially impossible. By 2024, reports revealed massive losses. Total cost estimates soared from $500 billion to $1.5 trillion, with $100 billion spent just moving dirt. By 2025, expenditures had already tripled initial plans, exceeding the budget of any comparable project worldwide. The country's main wealth fund spent $45 billion on early contracts, but it wasn't enough. Saudi Arabia relies on high oil prices to fund these projects, but prices have fallen, cutting roughly $100 billion a year from the national budget. With other countries producing more oil and global demand declining, funding for the line is drying up. Some construction has already halted, leaving enormous trenches in the desert, and major companies are pulling out, doubting the project will ever be completed. This financial strain has triggered a broader economic crisis. Saudi Arabia has always used mega-budget projects to lure international investors. There's always the next big thing on the horizon, which funnels money away from NEOM. This makes completing the project nearly impossible. Hype peaked in 2021, but by 2024, it was in freefall. With more than 10 massive projects running simultaneously, over 50 major delays, and billions in debt, it was unsustainable. Now, Saudi Arabia is trying to rebrand or merge projects to mask the challenges. When the market shifted, the whole project stalled. Every drop in revenue forced construction to stop. Publicly, officials insist things are going well, but budgets are quietly slashed. Top executives were fired and plans shrank. What was meant for millions is now aimed at a few 100,000 residents. Now, efforts have shifted to building a stadium for the Soccer World Cup. NEOM has now been rebranded as an industrial zone to keep workers on site. Officials use vague words like strategic adjustments to hide the truth. This reflects a broader pattern. Rather than address problems, the country quietly scales back while maintaining the appearance of progress. As of 2026, Saudi Arabia's wealth is diminishing. Neighboring countries maintain steadier economies, but Saudi Arabia is trapped, relying on massive loans to cover costly mistakes. No dream survives when funding dries up. Saudi Arabia is scrambling to preserve its legacy, pivoting to new concepts just to have headlines. NEOM has become a trillion-dollar disaster, shattering the vision of a futuristic city. But the story didn't end in 2024. It got even worse. The speed of the collapse was shocking. Physics problems identified years earlier were confirmed. Elevator systems and train simulations proved the 5-minute city was impossible. The straight-line design increased costs by 40%, and desert winds and heat were taking their toll already. Technological ambitions also came under scrutiny. Train tracks warped in heat, AI systems couldn't handle sandstorms, and $10 billion in research produced almost nothing. The decision was made to pivot to data centers, cheaper and easier than a futuristic city. This marked the start of NEOM's retreat. The human cost also went up in 2025. Meanwhile, worker deaths continued and massive strikes erupted over unpaid wages. Saudi Arabia was adapting, but the dream was vanishing. With each revision, the ambitious city shrank, leaving just bare structures in the desert. Towers have been abandoned mid-rise. Glass facades are cracked and layered with dust. The failure wasn't sudden, it was years in the making, from overambitious timelines. Budget shortfalls and a distracted leadership turned the project into a graveyard as attention shifted. Saudi Arabia is now billions in debt, scrambling for international loans while cutting domestic subsidies to cover the gaps. Just keeping the sand off the mirrors and running the computers would cost $5 billion a year, factoring in specialized cleaning crews and constant repairs to dust-clogged circuits. The country was losing too much money to keep it going, hemorrhaging cash as investor confidence evaporated overnight. The line promised people would live there by 2025, with luxurious apartments and zero-carbon transport. But a year later, it ground to a halt, leaving Saudi Arabia with billions in debt and a tarnished reputation. The green dream disappeared, replaced by barren lots where vertical gardens were supposed to thrive. Now, they're calling the leftovers green centers to save face, with token solar farms on the outskirts to claim environmental wins. But the line delivers a harsh lesson. It isn't just a bold idea, it's a chain of dependencies. Build a city so ahead of its time that the materials and workers just couldn't keep up. It just shows that even the boldest vision falters when its pieces don't line up, no matter the budget. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack. Missiles are faster, drones are cheaper, and the oceans that once protected America are starting to mean nothing. The Middle East isn't just a region, it's a trigger. The Caribbean has turned proximity into pressure. The Arctic is a missile corridor, and the Pacific, one miscalculation could spiral into something global. This is the real problem. America isn't facing one threat, it's reacting everywhere at once. Before any of that matters, the problem shows up clearly on a map. One of the most dangerous places on Earth is also one of the smallest. The Strait of Hormuz. Every single day, around 20% of the world's oil supply squeezes through this gap. For the US Navy, this is less a route and more of a trap. Iran has built advanced missiles and cheap drones that can be launched from the coast, not to win a war, but to make presence itself dangerous. The Persian Gulf has turned into one of the world's most dangerous hotspots. Every time a threat pops up, the US has to move a carrier strike group. Moving one into the Gulf means pulling it away from somewhere else. These multi-billion-dollar ships are essentially stuck in place, watching a small strip of water. One choke point can pin down an entire fleet. It ripples across the globe. In early 2026, Venezuela became a threat. Distance used to buy time, but now it removes it. The US response was fast and heavy. The USS Gerald R. Ford was sent to the area alongside other warships and F-35 stealth jets. But that deployment reveals the real issue. Every gap requires a massive reaction, and there are too many gaps. The Arctic used to be a wall of ice that no one could cross. Those days are over. As the ice disappears, new paths are opening up for trading ships and military vessels. Other countries are already moving into this space and building bases. The US military branch in charge of the North is racing to cover thousands of miles of new coastline, relying on icebreakers and sensors that were never built for this much work. And the stakes are high. Since the Cold War, the Arctic is the shortest path for a missile aimed at the US mainland. And with ice disappearing faster than ever, old strategies aren't enough anymore. The only way out is to change the rules of the game entirely. For years, a shield over the US existed in war rooms and science fiction. But now, that dream has become a $175 billion reality. It won't just change how wars are fought, it could change who wins them before they even begin. America is currently open to a missile attack, not because it's weak, but because the rules of war have changed. The only thing stopping a mushroom cloud-shaped disaster is the fear of retaliation. But deterrence only works after the first move. America wants to change that. It wants to stop the first move entirely. An intercontinental ballistic missile behaved like a baseball being thrown across a field. It would arc high into the sky, then fall back down. That path was predictable. Radar systems could see it coming. Computers could calculate where it would land. Hitting a missile was still hard, but at least the math behind it made sense. Hypersonic missiles have broken those rules. They don't just move faster, they're unpredictable, low altitude, constant maneuvering, minimal warning. By the time they're detected, it's a matter of seconds. Old radar systems are struggling to keep up. Most sensors were built to look up, to track targets following predictable paths, but they aren't built to spot something moving a mile every second while skimming just above the surface. There's not enough time for a human to make a decision. It's not even enough for older computers to calculate an intercept. On May 20th, 2025, President Trump announced a new design for a defense shield called the Golden Dome. Others tried, but walked away when the numbers failed. But that was before the hardware caught up. Money has been set aside, and construction has already started. A first payment has already gone through, $24.4 billion, approved under the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. Another $13 billion is locked in for 2026. But when you factor in development, global deployment, maintenance, and the need to replace satellites in orbit, the real cost doesn't stay in the billions. It hits the trillions pretty fast. Because total safety doesn't start on the ground. It depends on who controls what's above it and what moves around it. And that kind of pressure doesn't just cost money, it wears things down. Machines break, systems fail, people burn out. So even before the first interception ever happens, the system is already being tested. Not by war, but by the cost of simply keeping it alive. By investing now, the goal is to stop the endless cycle of moving ships and spending billions later. Making the land untouchable changes the dynamic of global power. It shifts the focus from the ocean into space. This is meant to end the era of vulnerability and start a new age where the map isn't just a list of problems to solve. Through this technology, the aim is to create a shield that stays up, even when the rest of the world is in chaos. The Golden Dome is designed to rebuild that lost time. And it's not just one system, it's a network. Thousands of satellites linked together with no blind spots. Sensors track launches the moment they happen and stay locked onto a target no matter how fast it moves or how much it turns. Once the threat has been identified, interceptors can engage early, even during the boost phase. The goal isn't to wait and intercept at the last second, it's to erase the threat before it even becomes one. Handling all the data is too much for any human to handle. That's where artificial intelligence steps in. The software looks at information from land, sea, and space all at once, and instantly decides which defensive tool has the best chance to hit the target. It might choose a missile in Alaska, a ship in the Atlantic, or a weapon in space. The system makes this choice and fires in a fraction of a second. Speed is the only way to beat a weapon that moves faster than sound. American companies are already hard at work. Lockheed Martin is developing the software that allows these defense systems to communicate seamlessly. Every piece of the system is already in production. The satellites, the interceptors, the software that ties them together into one continuous kill chain. By 2028, the first pieces of the shield will be up and running, and that will change the game for how the US deals with threats right now. The initial focus on hotspots like the Arctic and the Pacific means the most dangerous corridors will have real protection. There's no room for error. The enemy's tech is already out there. Every investment today is making the satellites tougher, harder to jam, and ready to survive attacks, so when the shield goes live, it actually works. This project is a total reset of how the world works. By building a shield that stays up all the time, the United States no longer has to react to every move another country makes. Success would mean that a carrier does not have to be parked in every single waterway to keep the country safe. Space becomes the new front line. All this comes at a huge cost. The problem with any defense is that the finish line keeps moving. History shows that every time a shield gets stronger, enemies immediately look for ways to break it. They might launch so many missiles at once that the system gets overwhelmed. Experts warn that the dome could accelerate a new arms race, one where countries aren't just stockpiling traditional weapons. Instead, they race to develop advanced technology specifically designed to bypass a so-called impenetrable shield. It'll create a cycle of escalation that may make global conflicts more unpredictable and technologically intense than ever before. It's a constant back and forth. The people building the shield versus the people trying to find a hole in it. Because if most missiles can't reliably reach the US mainland, everything changes. The most important piece of land in this system isn't in Washington either. It's in the Arctic, Greenland. It's not to do with politics, it's to do with geometry too. The shortest path between countries runs over the pole. Greenland sits directly underneath that path. If you control Greenland, you see the threat first. At the heart of this strategy is Pituffik Space Base, home to a massive radar that tracks missiles and objects in orbit. It sends data instantly to defense teams, detecting even the smallest objects with pinpoint accuracy. Greenland is transforming from a place that just watches into a place that can fight back. The plan calls for more sensors and even the possibility of interceptor rockets on the ice. If a threat can be stopped while it's still over the Arctic, it never reaches populated areas. By neutralizing danger far away, the risk to the mainland drops dramatically. If the Arctic is left open, though, the whole shield fails. This is what $175 billion actually buys. Not just defense, control of timing, control of space, control of geometry. But does the shield really make America untouchable? Once it's fully active, every other nation will have to completely rethink how they use their power. For many years, foreign policy was limited by the fact that the home soil could be targeted. Every time a move was made in a place like the South China Sea, leaders had to worry about a fight that might eventually reach American cities. That risk shapes decisions. The Golden Dome turns that into a one-sided equation. Enemies used the threat of missile strikes to pull the United States away from its friends and allies. They counted on the government never risking a city like Los Angeles to protect a distant ally. The dome changes the game. Every red line moves. Every enemy recalculates. The entire logic of nuclear deterrence, mutually assured destruction, was built on one belief: no one could stop the missiles once they launched. The dome shatters that assumption. If America can absorb a first strike and still retaliate, the threat of a nuclear exchange stops being mutual. It's the most significant change to the logic of war since Hiroshima. The military can choose when and where to get involved because the homeland is locked down. Friends and allies could see their roles change. If America no longer needs a wall of ships around it, the reasons for keeping those ships in certain places shifts. Protecting others becomes a choice, not something that must be done to keep the nation safe. Beijing's protests say a lot more than they intend. They reveal just how much the Golden Dome is already shifting the balance. Their argument is simple. If one nation can strike without fear of retaliation, the old rules of war no longer apply. That fear alone is changing behavior. Russia is already adjusting its strategy, and other nations are realizing they're facing a game they haven't fully figured out yet. Of course, the dome's greatest enemy might not be a ballistic or hypersonic missile. It's the dollar. Keeping it running for decades demands enormous funding. Every upgrade, every sensor, and maintenance cycle comes with a cost, and inflation, shifting budgets, or political crises could leave gaps in coverage or delay critical improvements. In the end, even the most advanced shield is only as strong as the money backing it. Funding isn't just a numbers game. It shapes how America can actually defend itself. For decades, the US had to chase threats across oceans. The Golden Dome alters that, and the world is starting to notice. It doesn't just defend the homeland, it reshapes the rules of global conflict. The first country with a sky no missile can breach may be the first to rewrite the world entirely. The era of reacting everywhere at once is over, and once the Golden Dome is complete, the world will learn a terrifying truth. Some players simply cannot bear to lose. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack. Have you ever needed to get to Pudong International Airport in a hurry? No problem. Just hop on the Shanghai Maglev, which holds the record for the fastest train on the planet. It can top out at a max speed of 311 miles an hour or 500 kilometers per hour. Want to travel at high speeds across the beautiful German countryside aboard a DB ICE-3? Cruising at 217 miles an hour or 349 kilometers an hour along its rails? Go for it. What if you're in the mood to take a quick ride from New York City to Chicago on a bullet train? Oh, wait. You can't. Nations around the world are light years ahead of the United States when it comes to high-speed rail technology. How could the wealthiest nation on the planet have such an inferior train system? Let's find out. To be considered a high-speed train, a train must travel faster than 125 miles an hour, or just over 200 kilometers an hour. This speed doesn't have to be maintained for the entire trip, but the train should reach it for most of the journey. High-speed trains aren't a futuristic concept. They're a proven technology. Japan's Shinkansen, the world's first high-speed rail system, began operating in 1964. That's right, while Japan revolutionized travel over 50 years ago, the United States is still struggling to catch up. Also, a web of high-speed trains allows passengers easy access to almost every major city in Europe, while the US is practically devoid of such connections. In 2009, there were ambitious attempts to expand the country's high-speed rail infrastructure. However, the plan was riddled with problems from the start. It was unclear how certain cities would be connected, as there were gaps in the tracks. To make matters worse, the plan outlined inconsistent speed limits. Some railways would reach a maximum of 250 miles an hour or 400 kilometers an hour, while others were capped at just 90 miles an hour or about 140 kilometers an hour, with no explanation. To be fair, you could theoretically get across the country by flying. However, there are some major benefits to taking a high-speed train. The fact that most plane flights between two cities are cheaper than a train ride is partly an illusion. The United States hugely subsidizes oil and gas, so the price you're paying for a plane ticket isn't really what it ought to be. If airlines were required to pay the actual price for fuel, no one would be able to afford a plane ticket as it would be too expensive. And since the United States stopped seriously investing in its railways a long time ago, taking the train itself has become more expensive due to a lack of demand and limited service. When you look at the population density in areas of the world that have built high-speed trains, you'll notice a stark difference between them and the United States. Places like Europe, China, and Japan have population densities that are much higher than most of the US. This is actually one of the reasons why these parts of the world invested so heavily in their train networks. It's also important to note that for many, having access to a train became a major part of their lives, and entire communities grew around these routes. Therefore, large numbers of people in these countries are invested in improving train infrastructure. After conventional rails spread across the landscape, the next logical step was to increase the speed of travel. This resulted in the transition to high-speed rails becoming the next step in transit evolution. The United States never embraced train travel in the same way. Even the northeastern United States, which has the most commuter rails and passenger trains in the country, has only built one high-speed rail, from Boston to Washington, D.C. However, this route can be expensive and still has significant sections where high-speed velocities can't be reached. The most obvious obstacles to building a high-speed rail network in the United States are costs and logistics. Unlike simply purchasing new trains, constructing a functional high-speed rail system requires extensive groundwork. For starters, the US can't just buy high-speed trains and put them on the existing tracks, or lack thereof. The current rail infrastructure, including tracks and signals, is so outdated that it would need a complete overhaul to handle the demands of high-speed travel. On top of that, certain routes are just not viable for high-speed travel, as the landscape and curvature of the track would not allow the train to reach over 125 miles an hour, which kind of defeats the purpose of using high-speed trains. In order to fix the already existing problems with the US railway system and build new tracks, takes to support high-speed trains, the government must purchase resources, land, and pay workers a fair wage. The sad part is that the United States invests less in its own infrastructure than almost any other developed country in the world. Over 13% of the annual budget goes to the military, with over 47% of discretionary funds being allocated to the armed forces each year. If the US spent as much money on infrastructure as it did on its military, there would be enough money to build a high-speed rail network while also improving the transportation methods already in service. This, then, brings us to a much bigger obstacle that a high-speed train network needs to overcome before it can be built in the United States, and that is good old-fashioned politics. The debate around high-speed trains and railroads in general has been happening for decades in the United States. The auto industry is a huge force to be reckoned with within the country, and there are definitely politicians influenced by the power and money that car companies have. But this isn't the main issue. What it really comes down to is that the federal government is the only one who can draw up a high-speed rail plan and fund it. However, the battle surrounding state rights has stood in the way of constructing a high-speed train network ever since the idea was first proposed. In order to build a railway network that could connect cities across state lines, the federal government would need to step in. Unfortunately, every time the federal government tries to come up with a plan for an interstate railway, it gets pushback from state representatives who believe it's overstepping its role. This problem is then exacerbated by the fact that no matter which presidency tries to start a high-speed rail project, it never comes to fruition due to the necessity of conducting multi-year studies, which oftentimes aren't completed until a newly elected official is in office. At this point, the proposed plan of the original administration is scrapped, and the new leadership has either no interest in creating their own, or they start all over again. This has led to a series of promises around high-speed rails that have not been kept. No one is arguing against impact studies being conducted and consulting experts before a high-speed rail system is built. But if every administration starts from square one when they're elected to office, there's practically a 0% chance that the United States will ever start connecting its cities by high-speed trains. This challenge is then further compounded by the fact that many states along the proposed routes have little to no experience in building modern railways. Without the necessary experience, implementing such a project would require significant oversight from the federal government, a prospect that faces steep resistance. Time and time again, administrations have proposed ambitious plans to develop the nation's railway infrastructure, yet these initiatives repeatedly fail to materialize due to a lack of long-term support and collaboration within the government. The next roadblock, or in this case, train block, has to do with the perceived corruption in the US government by its own citizens. People in the United States simply don't trust the government to do what it says it will do. Although there are many differences, an interstate high-speed railway could be comparable to the interstate highway system that was designed under the Eisenhower administration in the 1950s and built in the decades that followed. More on that later. When you look at a roadmap of the United States, it's clear that a lot of time, planning, and money went into the interstate highway system. This same process could be used to implement a high-speed rail network if things were the same as they were in the 50s. When the interstate highway system was proposed and accepted, over 70% of the country trusted the federal government and supported its decisions. That trust has since declined to around 22% in 2024. What this means is that even if the federal government does come up with a solid plan to build a high-speed rail network that is well thought out and cost-effective, the majority of the country might not even trust them to do what they say they will. This means that until the government regains the trust of its people, it will not be able to secure funding and complete any long-term projects, including building a high-speed rail network. This ongoing stalemate is incredibly frustrating for the many Americans who dream of a nationwide high-speed rail network. Such a system would not only provide a more affordable alternative to flying or driving, but also offer a greener, more sustainable mode of travel. But until the masses push for high-speed rails to be built or the politicians in power have a change of heart, the United States will continue falling behind in this public transportation sector. Oddly enough, even more worrisome for the future of US high-speed rails than politics is that the train system itself can't get out of its own way. The transition to high-speed rails would need to happen in stages. One practical starting point is utilizing the existing freight railroads to expand access to rail travel. This would encourage more people to shift gradually from a drive-everywhere lifestyle to one where taking the train becomes a regular option. However, almost immediately, this plan runs into problems. Chicago and St. Louis have been experimenting with the idea of connecting the two cities via railway to provide a more economical way to get between them. In order to do this, passenger trains were set up to travel along the existing tracks used by freight trains. These tracks already follow routes with few road crossings and allow the trains to travel between 90 and 110 miles an hour. This would be an excellent transition for passengers looking to use trains more often, especially if high-speed rails eventually came to the area. The problem is that the freight trains still use the tracks, and since they carry huge amounts of materials, they don't go very fast. The passenger trains often get stuck behind the freight trains, which leads to long delays and makes traveling by railroad unappealing for most people. To make matters worse, freight companies run the tracks, so even though they're supposed to prioritize passenger trains by law, this rarely actually happens. What this means is that the passenger trains that are supposed to be averaging 90 miles an hour are only averaging 53 miles an hour because of delays. Therefore, taking the train is even slower than driving, which is not an ideal situation for anyone trying to get somewhere quickly. If the passenger trains had priority and could average 70 miles an hour, this alternative would be both faster and cheaper than driving. But since so little importance is put on train infrastructure, this is not a viable option yet. But the biggest train block to high-speed rails is quite literally a roadblock. There's no denying that the majority of people living in the United States love their cars. From the time the Model T rolled off the assembly line to current electric vehicles, cars have always been a huge part of American culture. Most people rely on cars to get to work, visit friends, and even go on the great American road trip. Perhaps there's no better example of how much the United States favors cars than the interstate highway system. In the 1950s, the government could have come up with an interstate railroad system, but that wasn't in the cards due to the fact that car manufacturers realized how much money they could make by creating a car-dependent society. This led to intense lobbying that eventually resulted in the US government pouring money into the construction of roads and highways instead of railroads. People living in the suburbs with their families had little interest in hopping aboard a crowded train to get to work when they could just drive their brand new shiny Chevy to the office. The availability of cars led to more sprawl and more people moving to the suburbs. This was, and still is, a feedback loop. People want to live in the suburbs, so they need a car. People have a car, which allows them to move to the suburbs. If the United States developed in a way where most people couldn't afford, have access to, or just didn't need cars, it's highly probable that more railways would have been built to allow them to get from place to place. This would have resulted in a railroad network that could have eventually been upgraded to high-speed rails, similar to what many countries in Europe have been doing for the past several years. However, that's not how US history played out, and the obsession with owning a car or living in the suburbs only grew, which is exactly why the number of roads and highways also grew. In hindsight, this might not have been the best decision for the country, as we now face a climate crisis as a result of burning fossil fuels, some of which is done in car engines. Make no mistake, the average carbon footprint of someone living in the United States is much higher than in parts of the world where both high-speed and traditional train systems are widely used, with the exception of China. But the government is also partly to blame. It may be unpopular, but there is a way for the US to transition from being a car-centric culture to being more train-friendly. If the United States re-budgeted the money spent on infrastructure and directed more funds toward improving public transportation, it would be a step in the right direction. Rather than funding massive highway projects, the US could use that money to build more bike lanes and bus routes, both of which could lead to newly constructed high-speed train stations. Also, urban planning will need to shift to make US suburbs more walkable, so residents have access to public transportation and the things they need without having to hop in their cars to get there. In many countries, there are high taxes put on owning a car. For example, in Singapore, anyone who purchases a car must pay a registration tax on top of the purchasing price. This lowers the demand for cars and means more people advocate for alternative travel methods such as high-speed trains. And Singapore isn't the only country to heavily tax cars. Many countries in Europe place high taxes on owning a vehicle, and practically no other country subsidizes automobiles or gas at the same level as the US does. If the United States decided to increase the taxes for owning a car, this influx of money could be used to build an affordable high-speed rail system to carry its citizens across the country. As rail systems became more accessible, people would stop purchasing cars and start using public transportation more frequently. But US citizens have come to love their cars and the freedom they provide. Therefore, the government's only option is to make high-speed trains more appealing than traveling by car. In order for this to happen, the cost for riders must be low and the travel times must be shorter than driving. Until there is a shift in the mentality of most Americans, cars will reign supreme, and the government will have no incentive to change the country's current infrastructure. At some point, however, they may not have a choice. As urban centers grow and people become more conscious of their environmental impact, they may look for more sustainable travel methods. Perhaps in the future, this will lead to a growth in high-speed rails. Luckily, when we look at the data, there does seem to be hope for the United States when it comes to high-speed trains. According to recent polls, American voters overwhelmingly support investment and construction of high-speed rails. In fact, 60% of Americans would even support additional funding to get these projects moving. High-speed rail projects also have the backing of experts. Many railroad and civil engineers agree that building a functional high-speed rail network across the US is entirely feasible. However, achieving this goal will require significant government investment, collaboration between foreign and domestic companies, and a comprehensive restructuring of the existing rail system. In certain parts of the country, hope springs eternal, as high-speed rail projects have already begun. Currently, a high-speed rail is being constructed between Las Vegas and Los Angeles by the Brightline Company. The idea is that the train will be able to carry travelers between the two cities in just under 2 hours. This is under half the time it would take to drive the same distance if there were no traffic, which, let's be honest, isn't a realistic expectation for LA. Brightline has also recently completed a high-speed rail project in Florida that connects Orlando to Miami, while also making stops in West Palm Beach, Boca Raton, Fort Lauderdale, and Aventura. Brightline stated that their Florida high-speed train carried over 258,000 passengers in the month of March, just a matter of months since the service launched. The train travels at a maximum speed of 125 miles an hour, with the trip between Orlando and Miami coming in around 3.5 hours. So, some high-speed rail progress has been made, but what about the future? If the United States doesn't want to just play catch-up, but instead wants to be a world leader in train transportation, what are the options? Climate change is the existential crisis of our time. However, a company called Wabtec may be leading a train revolution towards combating the industry's greenhouse emissions. Wabtec is experimenting with hydrogen-fueled trains that could replace the fossil fuel-burning behemoths that are currently in use around the world. That being said, many high-speed trains use electricity or magnetism, but internal combustion engines still make up a large chunk of the train market. Therefore, it might be worth investing in new technology that will allow trains to travel with much lower emission levels. Currently, the US produces an estimated 10 billion kilograms of hydrogen annually, equivalent to about 10 billion gallons of fuel. Studies suggest that powering the trains already traveling across the country would require only 3.1 billion gallons of hydrogen fuel. That being said, the next futuristic rail technology would be even more environmentally friendly. Instead of using any type of fuel, high-speed trains could be powered by the sun. A solar rail would work the same way as a high-speed electric rail, except the energy needed to send the train and its passengers across the United States would be powered by the sun's energy. In fact, the first solar-powered train made its debut in Byron Bay, Australia in 2017, and it's still operational. The US would need to invest a lot of time and money into refining solar panels if they plan on powering a high-speed rail with the technology, but in places like the Las Vegas desert, there's ample solar radiation to capture. At a theoretical level, solar panels could be placed atop the roofs of the train cars and then supplemented by solar farms that sit along the train's route. When looking at future train technology, it'll likely be a combination of factors that help the US achieve a high-speed future. Perhaps trains will use a combination of solar, renewable energy, and hydrogen to achieve speeds over 200 miles an hour. But what about reinventing the very idea of a train? A company called Priestman Good has envisioned a world with trains that can act as moving platforms. This concept is only in its infancy, and the idea is that individual slower trains would travel around a city picking up passengers and then dock with a high-speed train that would whisk them off to their final destination. But in the future, perhaps high-speed rails would allow people from one coast of the US to cross the country while specific train cars disengage at different points. Maybe a high-speed route from New York City to LA will have separation locations as the train approaches Chicago, Denver, or Las Vegas. The best part is that the people going to LA would never have to slow down. Finally, there's the Hyperloop, which technically isn't a high-speed train, but an extension of what high-speed rails could be. At a basic level, a Hyperloop is like a single train car inside a tube with almost no air, a near vacuum. The tube serves two purposes. First, since it's a near vacuum, there's no wind resistance or drag, allowing the vessel to achieve high speeds with less energy. The second is to reduce friction as much as possible. By doing both of these things, the Hyperloop train could travel at speeds of 700 miles an hour, which would get you from LA to San Francisco in about 30 minutes. The Hyperloop would use maglev technology, similar to the Shanghai maglev. However, with the addition of a vacuum-sealed tube, this technology would put the United States on the frontier of high-speed train technology. That being said, Hyperloop progress has stalled due to a number of factors, most having to do with high costs to low benefits. What it all comes down to is that if the United States wants to catch up to the rest of the world in high-speed train technology, it will need to spend a ton of money, time, and resources into updating its existing railway infrastructure. Then again, none of that matters if government officials can't get out of their own way and work together to help build a high-speed rail network. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack. Americans love to complain about infrastructure, and sometimes they have a point. Half-built highways, rail projects strangled by politics, bridges leading to nowhere. It's a toddler's first Lego set, only this one costs billions. These are the infrastructure blunders that cost billions. Quick quiz. Which state spent $14 billion on a rail project that doesn't connect to any major cities? Stick around. That one's up first. And if you like these weekly map dives, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Somebody's gotta stop me from explaining 16th century trade routes at parties. Number 50. The high-speed rail to nowhere. California's high-speed rail might be the most controversial project in recent memory. Phase 1, San Francisco to LA. Phase 2, Sacramento to San Diego. The reality? Mostly paperwork and dirt. Voters signed off in 2008. By May of 2025, $14.4 billion had been sunk into it. Completion date? 2020. Unless these trains double as time machines, something's off. The plan now is Merced to Bakersfield, sometime in the 2030s. Maybe. If you're not from California, that's like subbing Paris to Rome with Strasbourg to Parma. Not quite the same. At this pace, the price tag could top $100 billion, and that's if it ever actually runs. And California isn't the only place building ghost trains. New York's has been stuck for over a decade. Number 49. New York's ghost train. The 2008 meltdown torched the economy, but hey, maybe Americans would at least get trains out of it. Lose your home, get a choo-choo. It's a win-win. Suddenly, high-speed rail was more than a California fever dream. President Obama rolled in with a $787 billion stimulus, and $8 billion of it went to rail. One of those tracks was supposed to be from Buffalo to Albany in New York. Supposed to be. Imagine pre-ordering a train in 2008 and still waiting in 2025. At least New Yorkers are used to delays. You might call this overdue. People in Manhattan call this a regular Tuesday. Number 48. Political hot potato 1. Let's just say Obama-era rail lines have been slow to leave the station. Some rail dreams never even made it out of the crib. In 2010, Republican John Kasich took the governor's seat. First order of business? Killing a rail line that would have linked Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Columbus. Turns out, the only thing moving fast in Ohio was Kasich's veto pen. Obama redirected $385 million elsewhere, but Ohio still burned through $15 million it couldn't recover. As far as politics go, that's kinda cheap. Number 47. Trouble in Paradise. I can't blame anyone for wanting to live in Honolulu. Tropical paradise, beaches, Mai Tais, but as the city sprawled, planners pushed for a rail line to link the suburbs to downtown. The catch? In 2006, it was costing $4 billion, about $200 million per mile. At that price, they might as well have paved it with surfboards. And the bill just kept climbing, thanks to expensive but pretty funny mistakes. Step 1, bulldoze past native burial sites. Step 2, lay tracks too wide for the wheels. By 2021, Honolulu's tropical transit dream had become an $11 billion blooper reel. Number 46, the second Seward's Folly. On Alaska's Seward Peninsula lies the last train to nowhere. It all started when Chicago investors got gold fever, so they decided to build a railway. Sensible, right? The good times would never end. Except they did. The project was canceled in 1907. After 35 miles, 56 kilometers, the line left nothing but debt and trains frozen like giant metal popsicles. But that's nothing compared to number 45. Florida's ghost train. Everyone who took U.S. history knows John D. Rockefeller. Fewer know his partner, Henry Flagler. Just like Johnny D., Flagler took his sketchy fortune and spent it in ways that looked generous, if you squinted at him. To help his sickly wife, Flagler decided Florida needed railroads. A lot of railroads. One was the Overseas Railroad from Key West to the mainland. Construction lasted from 1905 to 1912. Flagler died the next year, which was for good for him, because the project was always doomed. Back then, the Keys had few people, constant money problems, and the worst possible geography for hurricanes. In 1935, a Category 5 storm wiped out 40 miles, 64 kilometers of track. The bankrupt company never stood a chance. There's a long history of railroad blunders in the United States. Some have been much worse disasters, like this next one. Number 44, the first disaster. Railroads built America into the world's biggest economy. They also turned business into a knife fight. It also gave the nation its first major bridge disaster. St. Louis had dreams of launching the first transcontinental railroad. The problem was the Gasconade River. The solution was a 760-foot, 233-meter bridge to be finished on November 1st, 1855. Finished on paper, anyway. The first train rolled out with 600 passengers and plenty of celebration. The bridge, though, was propped up on temporary trestles. Not to worry, though, they were good for 4 miles an hour, hopefully. The train hit the gas. The coal, whatever. It went fast, and the bridge's east bank collapsed. Only one car remained on the tracks by the time the dust settled. 30 to 40 people died, and hundreds more were injured. And that's not the last disaster. Number 43, South Bend train wreck. Just a few years later, another bridge collapsed, this time in South Bend, Indiana. The route from Chicago to Toledo, Ohio, crossed the Springbrook Bridge over a deep ravine. The engineers had planned for everything. Well, except rain.
On June 26, 1859, storms flooded the culvert beneath the embankment. The next day, a train with 150 passengers tried to cross and the bridge collapsed. 33 people were killed, 57 injured. And somehow, 19th century bridge disasters only get stranger. Number 42, baptismal disaster. Everyone loves a good baptism, right? Anyone? Anyway. On May 4th, 1873, a crowd gathered in Dixon, Illinois to watch a baptism ceremony in the Rock River. People noticed a crack on the west side, right where the crowd was packed in. Seconds later, the bridge gave way. An 18-foot, 5.5-meter plunge into the cold water. 37 killed, 56 injured. 20 days later, the verdict was in. Bad iron, worse joints, sounds like my grandma complaining about her arthritis. It was a brutal takedown of contractor L.E. Truesdell's big idea, a bridge of short, portable parts. Problem is, they couldn't actually hold up a 660-foot, 200-meter bridge. But hey, at least he made bank. $2.6 million in today's money. Number 41, a fiery end. In 1863, America had its worst train accident of the century. A new experimental bridge was built over the Ashtabula River in Ohio. The key word here is experimental. The bridge was meant to be all iron. Heavier, yes, and that meant trains couldn't be. Then came the shortcuts. Diagonal beams thinner than the blueprints, iron that turned brittle in winter. So the bridge wasn't just waiting for disaster, it was waiting for winter. On December 29th, a train called the Socrates passed over the bridge. The engineer heard a crack, so he went full steam ahead. No one wants to be on a collapsing bridge. The Socrates made it. Hooray! But the train behind it, the Columbia, fell off the bridge, backwards. 92 people died, and 64 were injured. Designer Amasa Stone brushed off the flaws, which is easy when your seat isn't halfway to the river. The smallest mistake can have big consequences, as my dad likes to remind me. But in the next case, that's definitely true. Number 40, August 31st, 1893. 14 people died near Chester, Massachusetts. The cause? A bridge falling into the Westfield River as a train was running over it. But this wasn't because of a glaring design flaw. So what happened? Work crew negligence. For some big brain reason, they removed rivets from a connector plate. It weakened the bridge by 50%, so it couldn't take the weight when a train from the Boston and Albany Railroad went thundering over it. So far, we've learned about California's bullet train that still hasn't left the station, Honolulu's $11 billion rail blooper reel, and a baptism crowd in Illinois that got a little too literal when the bridge collapsed beneath them. And we have a few more costly and surprising infrastructure boo-boos. Number 39. On December 18, 1915, two trolley cars crossed each other on the Division Street Bridge in Spokane. Just like my workout attempts, it couldn't handle the weight. The northern section tapped out and fell into the river. 5 dead, 12 injured. What went wrong? The bridge's designer, Hugh Cooper, had a pre-packed excuse. Debris from a washed-out bridge back in 1894. Others weren't buying it. To them, the real culprit was lousy steel. The collapse was inevitable. The old days had their share of disasters. Then the 20th century came along and basically said, "That's cute, watch this." Number 38. This is the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. The sequel. The original bridge opened on July 1st, 1940. It didn't have long to live. On November 7th, it fell apart. The winds were gusting at 40 miles an hour, 64 kilometers an hour. Sure, hardly hurricane force, but it was enough. The bridge stretched nearly 6,000 feet, flexible by design. The flaw? Nobody factored in the wind. Shortly after 11 a.m., a 600-foot, 189-meter span fell first. The rest twisted in the wind, then followed. The ruins remain in Puget Sound. $227 million worth of oops. Number 37. The Tacoma Narrows disaster was a wake-up call for engineers, but some earlier planners clearly hit the snooze button before. On May 30th, 1928, the Silver Bridge opened across the Ohio River, linking Point Pleasant with Gallipolis. It was an I-bar chain suspension bridge, for the 3 bridge nerds taking notes. Each I-bar stretched 45 to 55 feet, 14 to 17 meters, 2 inches 6 centimeters thick, held together with 11.5-inch pins of high-strength steel. Impressive, right? Ready for the but? There were just 2 I-bars per link. Lose one, and you didn't just lose a link, you lost the entire bridge. The chains held nearly 40 years. Then, on December 15, 1967, during rush hour, one eye-bar cracked. It was just 0.1 inches, but that was enough to bring the whole bridge down. There were 46 victims. Number 36. A month before the Silver Bridge fell, the I-35 West Mississippi River Bridge opened. 40 years later, it joined the list. For bridges, middle age is the graveyard shift. On August 1st, 2007, at the height of rush hour, it fell apart, piece by piece. The central span exploded. Then the adjoining spans fell. 13 people were killed and 145 more injured. The steel gusset plates were undersized from the start. Then traffic got heavier. That meant the bridge was carrying weight it was never built for. You'd think these sorts of flubs would be over by now, but they're not. Number 35. On March 26, 2024, the MV Dal slammed into a pier of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, and it all came down in one shot. But authorities should have seen it coming. In 1980, just 3 years after the bridge opened, a ship hit one of the bridge's piers. That ship was only a third the size of the Dali, but bigger ships were on the way, waved in by local authorities. When the Panama Canal expanded in the 2000s, Baltimore prepped for bigger ships. Everything was ready, except the part where someone checked what would happen if one hit the Key Bridge. It wasn't a big deal. Well, if you don't count the 6 lives lost, the $1.7 to $1.9 billion for a new bridge, and $15 million bleeding away each day the port was closed. But America's infrastructure blunders don't stop at bridges, and they didn't stop in 2024 either. Number 34. Imagine being stuck in LA. Nightmare, right? Okay, imagine being stuck 450 feet, 137 meters below the city. Oh, and add in a collapsing tunnel. That's what nearly happened to 31 workers on July 14th, 2025. They were digging an 18-foot, 5.5 meter wide, 7-mile, 11-kilometer sewage tunnel to the ocean. 6 miles, 9.6 kilometers from the only exit, the tunnel ceiling gave way behind the crew. From the only access point. Luckily, all 31 got out. The bad news? The project is supposed to wrap by 2028. Good luck with that. And speaking of tunnels with bad luck, number 33. At 8:30 a.m. on May 13, 1949, a truck carrying 20,000 liters, 4,400 gallons of carbon disulfide entered the Holland Tunnel from the Jersey side. Illegal then, still illegal now. With rush hour traffic packed in, it still crawled 2,900 feet, 884 meters into the tunnel. Guess what happened next? One drum broke loose, vapors lit, and boom. Firefighters rushed in only for a second blaze to spark. The tunnel's ventilation system fought off the smoke and toxins, but 2 fans on the Jersey side burned out at 1,000 degrees, 538 degrees Celsius. The last fan kept going, only because someone hosed it down. 1 firefighter died, 66 others were injured. The law at the time offered a slap on the wrist, a $50 fine, and 5 days in the slammer, but the driver wasn't even charged. Today's penalties sting quite a bit more, but with only random checks, it's mostly luck of the draw. Turns out, fire and toxic fumes weren't the only tunnel disasters. Sometimes the real blaze is setting $600 million on fire without laying a single mile of track. That's coming up later. But New York's tunnel disasters don't stop that. Number 32. On October 24th, 1903, work crews were racing around the clock to dig a subway joining Upper Manhattan to downtown. It was practically rural then, barns, fields, and soon chaos underground. Crews fought stubborn granite, then rain turned it into an even bigger nightmare. The planners weren't worried. Hard labor wasn't on their to-do list. It was immigrants and black laborers doing the grunt work. 2 pounds, about a kilogram of dynamite exploded 1,000 feet, 300 meters from the tunnel's edge, 100 feet, 30 meters below 195th Street. Then everyone shrugged and got back to work. A gust of wind and the ceiling fell. A rock, 44 feet, 13 meters long and 5 feet, 1.5 meters thick, fell. There were 4 survivors. 10 others died, some crushed beyond recognition. Not every American infrastructure blunder is tragic. Some are just tragically funny, and there are plenty of those to go around, like the next bridge on the list. Number 31. California's San Gabriel Mountains have a bridge to nowhere. Really, it crosses the East Fork River, part of a highway project that died before it even got paved. Now it's stranded in Sheep Mountain Wilderness. It's used by hikers and bungee jumpers who treat it like nature's sketchy amusement park. The trail hasn't been maintained since 2010. A 2015 rockfall still blocks the way, and fatalities do happen. Proof that the bridge to nowhere does lead to somewhere bad. Number 30. From Bridge to Nowhere to Gate to Nowhere. In 2014, Washington Park had 2 leftover columns dressed in reflective acrylic. It passed off as modern art. The art was later removed, exposing what it really was: the stump of a dead project. In 1962, Seattle planned to ram the R.H. Thompson Expressway through Washington Park and even built the ramps. Locals revolted. Environmentalists and the Black Panthers teamed up like a weird Avengers crossover, only with picket signs. The project died in 1971, but the ramps sat there for decades. By 2016, they started to come down. One stump still remains in 2025, a concrete participation trophy for the protesters. Now, we've seen the I-35 West Bridge in Minneapolis fold at middle age, the Key Bridge in Baltimore taken out by one wrong turn, and LA nearly bury 31 workers in a sewage tunnel to nowhere. Ready to keep going? Good, because this disaster train don't stop for no one. Number 29. Alaska has some special infrastructure needs, but you probably already knew that. In 2016, an iceberg rammed a barrier protecting the Miles Glacier Bridge, better known as the $1 Million Bridge. Back in its day, it earned its keep. $200 million in copper moved across it. Then it got downgraded to a road bridge, wrecked in the '64 earthquake, and ignored until 2005. The patch-up job cost $19 million. For what? Good question. Forget driving over it. You can't even drive to it. These days, the $1 Million Bridge is basically a tourist stop for jet boats. Chances are the bridge will eventually collapse. The only reason anyone cares is salmon. Authorities fear a collapse could mess up the Copper River fishery. So the bridge might go down in history as the world's most expensive fish tank decoration. Number 28. Think building a bridge for salmon is questionable? Try building one for a single man. For industrialist Benjamin Franklin Mebane Jr., that wasn't madness. It was the plan. Mebane had a number of textile mills in North Carolina's Rockingham County, and by the 1920s, the Baron had a new idea: chemicals, and no, not the Breaking Bad kind. Mebane had the land, but it was cut off from the towns of Spray and Draper. His solution? Build a bridge across the Dan River. Mebane greased enough palms to push the bridge through. It opened in 1924, leading to nowhere. Roads finally arrived in 1935, 10 years after Mebane was gone, because the contractor sued the county to recover its losses, over $821,000 in 2025. Roads finally reached the bridge in 1968. By 2003, it was closed. Today, it's a relic, the prototype bridge to nowhere. But bridges aren't alone. America's got a few tunnels to nowhere too. Number 27. The Tiny Tunnel of Broken Dreams. Flagstaff, Arizona was booming in the 1880s. Railroads, lumber, and ambitious businessmen. Who needs Honolulu? James Eddy wanted to run a line south to the mining camp of Globe. Just one problem though: the Mogollon Rim. It was a rock wall marking the Colorado Plateau. To cross it, it meant a 3,000-foot-long, 900-meter tunnel that was 16 feet 5 meters wide. Easy on paper, brutal in stone. Not to worry, the project began. They dug 70 feet 21 meters before going broke. Eddy kept at it, chasing investors and laying 35 miles 56 kilometers of track. Then, the money ran out again, and the rails went to scrap. All that's left is a stub of a tunnel, if you can fight through the weeds to find it. Number 26. North Carolina's Smoky Mountains have their own pointless tunnel. 1,200 feet, 366 meters of concrete dead end at the tip of Lakeview Drive. There were roads once, until Fontana Dam drowned them in the 40s. Replacement roads promised in the 60s never happened. So now the tunnel just sits there, doing nothing. If you plan to walk through it, travel guides advise bringing a flashlight. It gets dark in the middle. It is an abandoned tunnel after all. Number 25. Back in the mid-90s, New Jersey Transit dreamed big with the Access to the Region's Core project. Translation? Dig a big tunnel. It would go from Secaucus Junction to a new station by Penn. Except it didn't. It took over a decade for construction to start. That happened in June of 2009. But then Chris Christie became governor. Less than a year later, he canned it. Don't worry, only $600 million was spent. Number 24. Under some of the world's busiest streets is another tunnel gathering dust. New Yorkers don't need prompting to roast the Metro Transit Authority, legendary for its budget black holes. So of course the city has its very own tunnel to nowhere. Today, the 2nd Avenue subway crawls from 63rd to 96th Street. But back in the 70s, the plan was bigger. They even dug a tunnel between 110th and 120th. Then the city went broke, sealed it up, and left it like a time capsule of failure. That might change soon though, with contracts for Phase 2 of the 2nd Avenue subway having been awarded in August of 2025. It only took over 50 years. Way to go. Number 23. East Fork Road was meant to link the San Gabriel Valley to Wrightwood in San Bernardino County, California. Then the Los Angeles flood of 1938 wrecked it. It caused $1.74 billion in damage in 2024 cash, wiped out the route, and left it half-finished. Today, it runs from Route 39 to a campground, and that's it. Number 22. Remember the $1 Million Bridge? It anchors Alaska's Copper River Highway, meant to run from Cordova to Chitina. But after the 1964 earthquake, the road barely stretched beyond it. Only 12 miles, 19 kilometers were paved. The rest were left for the elements. In 2011, it got a shiny new title, the Scenic Byway. 3 months later, erosion shut down Bridge number 339. The highway ends there, and has ever since. Scenic? Maybe. Useful? Not so much. Number 21. Politics and infrastructure don't mix very well, like fire and gasoline. In 2008, Sarah Palin, then Alaska's governor and VP candidate, claimed credit for stopping the Gravina Island Bridge, better known as the Modern Bridge to Nowhere. Seriously, there are bridges to nowhere everywhere. At this point, it's basically its own genre of public works. What Sarah Palin didn't mention was the $25 million already burned. For what? A 3.2-mile, 5-kilometer road that begins at a dead end and ends at Ketchikan's airport. A road to nowhere, unless you count the terminal. Number 20. Back in the 70s, Illinois tried to fix Waukegan's traffic with the Amstutz Expressway, a 2.9-mile, 4.6-kilometer stretch of Route 137. It was supposed to cut through downtown congestion. Instead, it stalled in North Chicago. Guess where it went? That's right. Nowhere. The short road still exists, only 15,000 vehicles use it a day. Needless to say, the traffic stayed. The Amstutz was just money poured into asphalt with no return. We've had $1 million bridges that now serve salmon, tunnels abandoned mid-dig, and roads that start with fanfare and end at campgrounds or airport driveways. Oh, and we can't forget about the bridges that went, hang on. That's right, nowhere. America's infrastructure may not get you where you're going, but it'll get you nowhere in style. Number 19. Back in 1962, the state of Arizona started building Route 76, a road meant to tie Route 77 to Pepper Sauce Wash. Great name, terrible plan. There was also a leg to Benson and San Manuel's copper mine. By 1974, the mine section was decommissioned. By 1988, the whole road was abandoned. The one thing left? A name. The Department of Transport still keeps Route 76 on the books. Basically, millions of dollars for fancy letterhead and a few road closed signs. Number 18. On paper, Maryland Route 10 was going to save Route 2 traffic. 6 lanes running from Baltimore's Edge to US 301. The idea's not a new one. It's been around since the 50s, but just like the traffic, construction crawled. Once I-97 showed up, the rest of the plan died. The last piece opened in 1991. Route 2 jams never went away. Route 10 now hauls a modest 51,600 cars daily. Okay, that sounds bad, but a nuclear power station blunder? That's a whole new tier of nightmare fuel. Stick around, that one's coming up. Number 17, along Pennsylvania Route 23 near Bridgeport, you'll find half-built ramps and stretches of pavement. The rest is just empty fields. They're reminders of a road that collapsed straight out of the blueprint stage. In the 60s, Pennsylvania dreamed up the Schuylkill Parkway, a freeway linking US 30 to Route 772. It never happened. What's left is nicknamed the Goat Path, and it's not named after LeBron. It's all because construction stopped right away. There was instant opposition over environmental concerns. Oh, that and the whole lack of money thing. The freeway died in 1977, its right-of-way planted over and rented out to farmers. What was supposed to carry cars now carries cows, and hasn't changed since. Number 16. U.S. Route 222 in Pennsylvania moves from Lancaster County to Maryland's Cecil County. But get to reading, and locals will tell you about their road to nowhere. It started in 1964 and originally ended in a cornfield. By 1999, it hooked up with the Warren Street Bypass and Route 422. For the first time in decades, it gave the impression of being an actual highway. By 2006, the road linked into its current route, but northbound traffic just dumps onto Route 73 at the Blandon bottleneck. Even local reporters joked it was still going nowhere. Talk about false hope.
Number 15. Remember that tunnel in North Carolina? It wasn't pointless by accident. It was part of Lakeview Drive, promised in 1943 to replace Park Road's drowned by Fontana Lake. Construction started, stretched 6.5 miles from the dam to Bryson City, and stopped. By 1971, $4.1 million was gone. In 2001, a congressman threw another $16 million at it. The road never budged. Swain County eventually cashed in. $52 million in 2010 for breach of contract, due by 2020. But the road wasn't finished bleeding money. In 2023, it needed another $15.6 million in repairs. At this rate, it's less a road and more a subscription service.
Number 14. Few people live in the center of the United States. But there's a big road, Route 83. It goes from West Hope, North Dakota to Brownsville, Texas. Sure, there are stops, the Alamo, if you swing wide. You can even time your trip for the Ozfest in Liberal, Kansas, celebrating the Wizard of Oz, if you're into celebrating fictional real estate damage. But it's mostly prairies, as far as the eye can see. Number 13. April 13th, 1992 was supposed to be a normal day in Chicago. The Kinzie Street Bridge needed repair, so crews drove new pilings 3.5 feet a meter south of the old ones. One small problem, though. Nobody mentioned the forgotten tunnel right below them. The pilings didn't crack it, but they shoved clay into it until it gave way. The clay liquefied and the tunnel flooded. A worker noticed, but the city's response was about as fast as rush hour on the Dan Ryan. Soon, the basements of buildings in the loop were flooded with dirty water. It and the financial district had to be evacuated. Operations at the Chicago Board of Trade were suspended. The Merchandise Mart building reported fish swimming in its basement. Hey, free aquarium. The price tag, roughly $4 billion adjusted. The cause, a communication screw-up so bad, the contractor walked and the city took the heat. Number 12. 3 Mile Island got its shiny new nuclear plant in 1969. $2 billion in today's money. Nothing could go wrong, yeah? Well, just 10 years later, on March 28, 1979, a pressure valve refused to close, and everything went wrong. As Unit 2 lost cooling water, the real meltdown came from human error. Operators misread the gauges and turned off the backup water. And here I am, stressed about uploading a video. Anyway, temperatures reached 4,300 degrees Fahrenheit, 2,300 degrees Celsius, and contaminated water started to leak into a nearby building. And the radioactive gases decided to join the party. 140,000 people had to evacuate. The backup systems kicked in and the reactor core stabilized. But 3 years later, the truth came out. The Unit 2 core was half molten. Cleanup dragged on for 14 years and $2 billion in today's money. The real cost was what came after. Nuclear power's reputation tanked, carbon emissions soared, and only now is it clawing its way back. Still, as scary as meltdown sounds, nothing tops infrastructure that fails by sending an actual wall of water at you. Number 11, 2020, the year of toilet paper hoarding, dodging strangers, and breathing too close, which got you the death stare. pretty much my normal lifestyle. But on May 19th, Michigan's Edenville and Sanford dams decided to call it quits. Built in the 1920s, Edenville had a fatal flaw: loose sands in its embankment. Heavy rains soaked them in. Pretty soon, the soil collapsed, and so did the dam. Add in a downstream slope steeper than common sense, and it never stood a chance. Honestly, the miracle was that it held together for as long as it did. When Edenville failed, a huge current surged into Sanford Lake. It overflowed, and the residents of nearby Midland had to evacuate. $175 million in damage was done. Turns out, ignoring dirt and geography costs money. About $4.8 billion to be exact. We've hit our top 10, and we've discovered roads that end in cornfields, tunnels double as cash vacuums, and a nuclear plant can melt its reputation. Any ideas what the biggest blunder is? Let's find out together. Number 10. On July 24th, 2010, Delhi's dam collapsed. Delhi, Iowa, that is. There were warning signs. Floods in 2008 caused $500,000 in damage. Then in 2009, a safety inspection found minor issues. Minor issues, major miss. Built in the 1920s, the dam skipped a key detail. A concrete wall didn't reach the crest. So when 10 inches, 25 centimeters of rain fell in 12 hours, erosion sped things up. It meant 8,000 people were evacuated. No lives were lost, but $16 million had to be spent on a replacement dam, finally finished in 2016. A late fix for an early oversight. Number 9. There were once 2 Austin dams in the United States, and they're both gone now. Austin was booming by 1900, but just not fast enough for the city's bankers and land barons. Their solution? Build a dam on the Colorado River. It would irrigate fields, power factories, and, most importantly, line their pockets. After some legal gymnastics, the city borrowed $1.4 million in 1890 to make it happen. It was a disaster. The spot was badly chosen. The chief engineer quit over the poor materials being used. By 1893, the dam was complete, but it never generated the power its champions said it would. On April 6, 1900, a storm hit. By the next day, the river was spilling over the dam and ripping it to pieces. 50 lives were lost. A new dam didn't arrive until the 1940s. Talk about a rain check. Number 8, the second Austin Dam. George Bayless owned a paper mill in Austin, Pennsylvania, and in 1909 he needed water. The valley wasn't reliable, so he ordered up a dam. Seriously? DoorDash struggles with my nuggets. It was supposed to be 30 feet thick, 50 feet high, and 540 feet long. That's 9 by 15 by 165 meters. About $3 million in today's money. You probably guessed it, there was some cost cutting. The dam only got to 20 feet, 6 meters thick. But wait, there's more. One small detail got skipped. The underground concrete slab meant to stop water from sneaking under the dam. Always nice when the foundation is optional. The dam had less than 2 years to live. It rained for a week at the end of September 1911. Water rose to 48 feet, 15 meters high, and the dam couldn't hold back the pressure. Over 3,000 people were in town that day. 78 died. Bayless cost-cutting cost $10 million in property damage. Today, the ruins are on the National Register of Historic Places. A second dam was built and also failed. So they gave up on the whole damn thing. Pun intended. Number 7. Arizona's first major infrastructure project ended in disaster. In February of 1890, the Walnut Canyon Dam above the town of Wickenburg burst. Over 100 people died. How did it happen? Money, obvi. 2 New Yorkers, Wells and DeWitt Bates, yes, that's their real names, thought they'd struck gold, literally. They had bought a mine in Yavapai County and dammed the Hassayampa River. Too bad they treated it like a stock gamble instead of an engineering project. A couple of heavy rains later, the spillway started to cave. The disaster hit peak stupidity when the superintendent sent Dan Berkey, a known drunk, to warn the town, and paid him in advance. Dan Berkey did what Dan Berkey did. He drank it all. The dam gave way just after midnight. The Wells should have known better. They had recent history to go off of. Number 6. Williamsburg, Massachusetts has a 15-mile, 24-kilometer stream, the Mill River, but it's not the same year-round. In 1864, the Williamsburg Reservoir Company was formed. The objective? Dam the river and have a reservoir power their operations in drier summer months. Simple fix, right? Nope. The bosses went cheap, not safe. Despite warnings from surveyors and workers, they cut corners. Finished in 1866, the dam stretched 600 feet, 183 meters by 43 feet, 13 meters high. Earthen embankments propped up a stone wall. 8 years later, heavy rain seeped through the sloppy grouting and ripped off a 40-foot, 12-meter slab of earth, and the whole thing crumbled after that. The cost-cutting had big costs. $100,000 in relief and an additional $120,000 to rebuild Williamsburg and other towns. Plus, 139 lives that could never be rebuilt. But that was nothing compared to an entire city underwater. Number 5. 50% of New Orleans is below sea level. It wasn't always like that, but a growing population demanded more land. By the turn of the 21st century, the city was almost 12 feet 3.6 meters below sea level, so it relied on a network of levees to keep the water out. Hurricane Betsy swamped New Orleans in 1965, racking up over $1 billion in damage. Congress told the Army Corps of Engineers to modernize the levees. 4 decades later, the work was still only 60 to 90% done. Warnings came in 1998 after Hurricane George rattled Lake Pontchartrain. The message was clear: one big storm could drown the city. 7 years later, Katrina did. Nearly 1,400 fatalities were recorded. It cost $125 billion at the time, tied for the costliest storm on record. $20 billion for 350 miles, 560 kilometers of new levees was part of that. All the money spent before then was a waste, and then some. But an even deadlier flood wasn't because of a storm, it was the product of greed. Number 4. The deadliest U.S. infrastructure disaster wasn't about failure, but misuse. Pennsylvania's South Fork Dam was built in the mid-1800s as a reservoir. By 1881, it was the private playground of the South Fork Fishing and Hunting Club. Picture Gilded Age tycoons like Andrew Carnegie sipping brandy at Lake Conemaugh while sitting on a ticking time bomb. To keep themselves cozy, the club made a few changes to the dam. Bad ones. What started as a convenience would end in catastrophe. On May 31, 1889, it rained hard. Between 6 and 10 inches, 15 to 25 centimeters fell in just a day. By morning, Johnstown's streets were already filling with water. By mid-afternoon, the dam was gone. What came next hit Johnstown like Niagara Falls on wheels, flattening homes, livestock, and anyone in the way. 2,200 lives lost and $590 million in today's money. Worst waterslide ever. You got your own pick for the worst infrastructure screw-up? Let me know in the comments. Now it's time for the last 2, and the final grade. Number 3. Water woes. Part 1. Some places drown. Others go thirsty. Even today, 2.2 million Americans live without running water. That's basically all of Houston turning the taps and getting nothing. The cost? About $8.5 billion in lost labor and productivity, hitting minority, rural, and Native American communities the hardest. Leading us to number 2, up to 10 times as many Americans aren't short on water, they're just getting it through lead pipes. Flint, Michigan grabbed the spotlight, but Chicago is the real nightmare. 80% of homes still use lead service lines, thanks to a building code that actually required them until 1986. In 2019, then-Mayor Lori Lightfoot introduced an $8.5 billion plan to replace the 650 toxic pipes. By 2021, they had removed 3. One lawmaker said it would take 500 years at that pace, making it less a public works plan and more a time capsule project. Something as basic as this should give you a clue about what's coming next. Finally, number 1. It might not seem like it, but America poured $1.5 trillion into infrastructure over 20 years. The result? Drumroll please, the American Society of Civil Engineers bumped its grade from a D in 2001 to a D+ in 2025. about the same curve my GPA survived on. What disasters do you think will rack up trying for a C? Let me know below. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. It really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack.
The United States. Land of the free, home of the brave, and the hub for insane facts. Let's get straight into it. Number 50. Canada is one of the world's biggest countries, right? Lots of space for ice hockey and maple syrup, but the US actually has more land. Canada has an area of 3.8 million square miles, but the land area is 3.51 million square miles. South of the border, there are 3.53 million square miles. Not a big difference, but hey, it all counts. Canada makes up the difference with really cold bodies of water. The United States probably got the better end of that deal. But up north, it isn't always frostbite and snow. Number 49. Alaska and Hawaii couldn't be more different. Oil, tourism, volcanoes, glaciers. But when it comes to temperature, they're practically twinsies. Hawaii's highest temperature ever recorded, 100 degrees Fahrenheit back in 1931. That's the same as the highest temp ever recorded in Alaska. It was in 1915, if you're wondering. Planning that next sunshine vacay? Don't rule out Alaska, although you may need a time machine. From one tropical paradise to another, and it's not where you think. Number 48, pop quiz. What's the best place to work on your tan? South Beach or Central Park? The highest temperature ever recorded in Miami was 98 degrees Fahrenheit. In New York City, it was 106 Fahrenheit. We'll let you decide if you prefer angry New Yorkers to the hurricanes. So whether you prefer sweating in Miami or boiling in New York, one thing's for sure. You'll probably fly through this next place to escape both. Number 47. What do you think is America's busiest airport? It's not LAX or a JFK. Nope. Wrong. It's Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. 104.7 million passengers passed through here in 2023. That's a lot of lost luggage. The distant runner-up is Chicago's O'Hare with about 85 million. LAX is 5th, and JFK? It's 6th. Atlanta is a major hub for Delta Airlines, which has thousands of daily flights. It's also strategic ground. 80% of the American population lives within a 2-hour flight of it. And while all those passengers are zipping across the country, here's a place that still manages to surprise everyone. Number 46. The Silver State is the driest in the country. You're lucky if you get 10 inches of rain a year. But snow? That's a different story. Nevada gets more snowfall than Washington, D.C., and it's cold, too. Average low temperatures in Vegas are around 80 degrees Fahrenheit in June, July, and August. Winter lows, though? They can be near freezing. Let's keep turning up the heat, though. Number 45. Death Valley, a place that lives up to its name. It gets so hot here, it could double as Satan's Airbnb. How hot? The highest verified recorded temperature on Earth, 134.1 degrees Fahrenheit, at a place called Furnace Creek in 1913. The U.S. continues to throw up wild weather, from toasty to twisters. Number 44. The United States gets over 1,200 tornadoes a year, the most in the world. Not really something you put in the tourist brochure. It's all thanks to America's one-of-a-kind geography. Open-ended land sandwiched between the tropics and the cold air coming down from Canada. That's pretty much a welcome mat for tornadoes to come down and have a party. A seriously destructive party that makes insurance companies wake up in cold sweats. The only states where you won't get twisters relocating your house on a regular basis, Alaska and Hawaii. But they have polar bears and volcanoes, so, Tornadoes might tear up the land, but the borders? Those got ripped up by history. Number 43. The 13 OG states still have their colonial-era borders, and back then, map makers weren't exactly working with GPS. Close enough seemed to be the motto. Those early states were also massive compared to today. When they eventually coughed up land to the federal government to make new territories, the decisions were often guided by their old colonial charters. Pretty much every state east of the Mississippi has at least one border drawn by someone with a British accent. Well, except Wisconsin and Michigan, who were lucky enough to be out of reach before Britain could doodle on their map. While the rest of the US was busy drawing lines, Hawaii was busy being Hawaii. Number 42. There's only one state in the Union that doesn't have a straight line border. Any guesses? Well, take a second. It's Hawaii. Kind of easy when you're a bunch of islands. So yeah, the US is big. Big enough that time itself gets confused. Number 41. The US collects time zones like Pokemon. How many does it have? 11 time zones. Somewhere in America, it's always too early, too late, or time for lunch. The US tied with Russia for second most time zones in the world. Only France has more, with 13. All thanks to its overseas territory, including Adeliland in Antarctica. So far, we've seen that the US hoards tornadoes, time zones, and temperature swings like it's trying to win geography on this one. And that's just the start. Number 40. Beyond Canada and Mexico, the US has numerous maritime boundaries, such as with Russia, the Bahamas, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Haiti, the UK, Netherlands, Jamaica, and even Japan. It's all thanks to maritime borders and exclusive economic zones, which basically let the US say, if I can fish there, it counts. Number 39. Road trips and the US go hand in hand. But ever wondered how the roads are numbered? If it ends in a 5, it's kind of a big deal. The VIP of the asphalt world, and it'll be going north to south. Major interstate highway routes that go east-west always end in a 0. Odd, even. Get it? And those major routes always have 2 numbers. The 3-digit highways are the sidekicks, shorter roads that loop into cities or hook back into the main routes. Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico have interstate highways, despite not touching another state. Their road numbers start with an A, H, or PR. Consistency clearly ran out of gas when it hit the coast. So, after mapping borders, America turned its attention inland. Number 38. In 1806, Congress decided the country needed a federally funded highway. It was called the National Road, original. It went from Maryland to Illinois, which back then felt about as cross-country as it got. Over 100 years later, the Victory Highway from 1921 celebrated World War I and overlapped earlier routes like the National Road. In 1926, the U.S. numbered highway system arrived, and much of Victory Road became U.S. Route 40, which was later sliced and diced again by the Interstate Highway System. Nothing says we won like a collection of exit signs and rest stops. Not every road got the Hollywood treatment, some just quietly kept going. Number 37. Copper Harbor is the farthest point in America from any interstate highway. But U.S. Route 41 starts right there. From Michigan's frosty tip, it snakes all the way down to Miami, where snow shovels are replaced by sunglasses. It was supposed to be included in the interstate highway system, but it was left in the cold, literally thanks to a bureaucratic error, because apparently someone's job was to punch in and hide from the boss that day. Upgrades were slow to come, but finally, an enterprising U.S. congressman included a provision to make it I-41 in 2015. Turns out the long road to success is a literal road. And if you like these map dives, make sure to hit that subscribe button. I'm basically the Nebraska of YouTube. Flat, overlooked, and somehow still here. Anyway, from a forgotten road to one of the most famous. Number 36. U.S. Route 66 from Chicago to Santa Monica is so famous that there's a fake version of it in China. But when it came time to build the interstate highway system, Route 66 didn't make the cut. Why? It just wasn't efficient enough. The road takes detours around obstacles. President Eisenhower, fresh off seeing Germany's high-speed autobahns during World War II, wanted roads that plowed straight through anything in the way. Hills, valleys, small towns, small animals. You can thank the Cold War for that speed over scenery mindset. If Route 66 shows how America traded beauty for speed, this next one shows what happens when the whole country refuses to slow down, even for sleep. Number 35. The United States loses 1.23 million working days every year because people weren't getting enough Z's in. A whole nation pulling an all-nighter for no reason. The cost? About $411 billion a year. Those power naps you sneak in at lunch, they're basically patriotic. Go ahead, close your eyes. You're saving the economy. If lack of sleep makes Americans feel like they're climbing uphill every day, this next one's about a road that actually does. Straight into the clouds. Number 34. The Mount Blue Sky Road is the highest paved road in the United States. It's over 14,100 feet up, twice as high as Denver. It's not exactly Route 66, but it's got its own kind of traffic. Mountain goats and bighorn sheep casually hanging out on the roadside like locals. They've seen enough cars to not care. They'll absolutely photobomb your selfies. Colorado's roads have mountain goats. Alaska's? Just miles of silence and the occasional trucker questioning their life choices. Number 33. The emptiest road in the country, Alaska's Route 11, from Fairbanks to a place with the fitting name of Dead Horse. Mildly exhausted horse didn't fit the vibe. 196 vehicles swing through here every day, and a lot of those are ice road truckers. Makes sense. Dead Horse had a population of 26 in 1990. Out here, traffic jams are a myth, gas stations are dreams, and the nearest Starbucks is probably in another time zone. After surviving Alaska's endless nothing, welcome to LA, where standing still counts as driving. Number 32. If California were its own country, its economy would be the fourth biggest in the world, $4.1 trillion. Only the US, China, and Germany beat it. Not bad for a place that spends its money on avocado toast and real estate. And California is not the only one flexing. Texas has the same GDP as Italy. New York is bigger than South Korea. Even Pennsylvania's economy is as big as Saudi Arabia's. Number 31. US Route 20 isn't exactly a seamless ride. You can blame the elk, bison, and all the other stubborn critters for that. Yellowstone National Park cuts through it, forcing drivers to detour around. That still doesn't stop it from being the longest road in the United States, almost 3,400 miles from Boston to Newport, Oregon, coast to coast bragging rights. It's been around in its current form more or less since 1926, but it got a patriotic glow-up at the end of 2024. Well, sort of. It became the National Medal of Honor Highway. Same asphalt, new aura. Now we know that the US has roads for everyone, from truckers to tourists to the occasional confused bison. Ready for the next facts? Drop in the comments which one surprised you so far. Number 30. Arizona has some of the hottest temperatures in America. Expect highs in the low hundreds in June, July, and August. Except for at Flagstaff. The average high here is only 80 Fahrenheit. Perfect for anyone who doesn't like boiling alive. But Arizona isn't as sweltering as you might think. The Flagstaff area has at least 3 ski resorts. There's another near the Apache Sitgreaves National Forests, and there's even one just north of Tucson. Nothing says hitting the slopes like speeding by a cactus. Enjoy those wide-open slopes while you can, because a state over, everything comes to a standstill. Number 29. America's busiest road is the I-5 stretch, spanning Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Santa Ana. Average daily vehicles, 504,000. That was in 2019, so things are probably busier now. If you ever need to brave it, plan ahead, or better yet, plan around it. And if you find yourself there at rush hour, well, I hope you packed snacks. And maybe an audiobook trilogy. After battling the I-5, you'd think California's only export is stress, but it actually supplies something far more important. Number 28. When you think of California's economy, you think of tech. Apple, Nvidia, Meta, and Alphabet are all headquartered here. Tesla used to be too, before Elon Musk decided Texas offered more opportunities to be, well, Elon Musk. But California's other big moneymaker is way older, 12,000 years older. It's one of America's agricultural powerhouses and grows over 25% of the country's fruits, vegetables, and nuts. It feeds the country and runs its apps, the ultimate overachiever. While California's out here planting crops and coding apps, New York's just planting dollar signs. Number 27. New York City is like its cockroaches. It can survive almost anything. Economic crashes, crime waves, freak hurricanes, pandemics, the city just dusts itself off, grabs a bagel, and keeps going. About $2 trillion flows through the city's financial networks every day. That's the same as Russia's entire economy. Sorry, Vladimir. There's just too much money going around. New York City is pretty much untouchable, the ultimate grind machine. So with all that cash flying around, you'd think America would be debt-free by now. You'd be wrong. Number 26. How does the US manage to rack up massive deficits and still sleep just fine? Easy. It's got the world's reserve currency, a financial cheat code. When the gold standard went belly up in the 1970s, America made a convenient agreement with Saudi Arabia. Sell your oil in dollars. The rest of OPEC joined in and boom, the petrodollar was born. Now, if you want oil, you need dollars. It's like the world's biggest cover charge, and Uncle Sam is on the door. Sure, OPEC might have lost its swagger, but the US dollar still calls the shots in global energy, letting America print, spend, and borrow like a college kid with a credit card. Except the debt collector also uses dollars. And running the world's money wasn't enough. The US went ahead and took over its computers, too. Number 25. Taiwan might be the king of actually making semiconductors, but the United States controls about 47% of the global semiconductor sales. That means important chip architectures, design tools, and patents that make those tiny silicon brains work. So while Taiwan's busy cranking out the chips, the US is the one holding the instruction manual. And that's a serious headache for China, which can't design cutting-edge chips without bumping into an American copyright somewhere. Controlling the tech is great. Controlling the stuff that makes the tech? Even better. Number 24. The United States is the OP country of the real world, loaded with resources like it's playing on easy mode. Altogether, it's sitting on about $45 trillion worth of natural goodies. There's oil, natural gas, rare earth metals, copper, timber, and gold. It's the Costco of the world. It's the second richest country in natural resources. Top of the class? Russia, with $75 trillion. But unlike Russia, the US has ports, pipelines, and logistics running 24/7 to move the goods. So, yeah, the US is rich in everything except sleep. Number 23. North Dakota's Route 46 runs for 121 miles in a straight line, the longest in the United States. It could practically double as a ruler. In fact, it's so straight that it's actually ranked 4th in the world, behind only Saudi Arabia's Highways 85 and 10 and the La Gerenza Estigarribia in Paraguay. It's less a highway and more a test of how long your attention span lasts before you start naming fence posts. Number 22. What does all of this wealth add up to? A $27.7 trillion economy, 26.1% of the world's GDP. The US economy is bigger than China, Germany, and Japan combined. It's like showing up to a group project and realizing one person did all the work, and then charged everyone for it. But it turns out, when one country does all the work, a handful of people get all the paychecks. Number 21. The United States had 813 billionaires at the end of 2024. Their net worth, about $5.7 trillion. That means combined, these 813 people are richer than every other country except the United States and China. Not bad for a group small enough to fit in a football stadium center, assuming it had valet parking private jets. So America's crushing it in cash and chips, but clearly not in sleep. Which one surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. Number 20. The bottom 99% of American households have a net worth of about $110.8 trillion. Obviously, someone's doing great. Clearly, no one told my bank account, though. Meanwhile, the top 1% of households control a net worth of $49.2 trillion. That's how rich America really is. One group's buying yachts. The rest of us are still trying to find spare change for gas. Money might make America powerful now, but it all started with one giant impulse purchase. Number 19. Spain used to own the Louisiana Territory, and America had to haggle over navigation routes. Then Napoleon swooped in and took it back, and brought drama. Classic small man energy. But his grand plan to rebuild a North American empire went up in smoke, all because of a slave revolt in what became Haiti. Suddenly, that Louisiana land wasn't worth the trouble, so Thomas Jefferson dropped $15 million for it, around $370 million today. It was the biggest land deal in American history. 828,000 square miles. America doubled in size overnight, all thanks to a slave revolt Jefferson opposed and a financial system he spent decades hating. Hypocrisy? Sure, but when you double your country's size, people tend to let that slide. And that's not the only bargain the US has picked up. Number 18. Back in the day, Russia needed money after it lost the Crimean War, and they slapped a big for sale sign on Alaska. So Secretary of State William Seward offered a nice deal to buy the distressed property for $7.2 million, $130 million today. The Tsar said, sold, probably thinking he'd just unloaded a useless icebox on the Americans, and so did most of the US. But Seward had the last laugh. Alaska had gold, and oil, and natural gas, all more than enough to pay for itself, and then some. Not bad for a deal everyone mocked as buying a giant ice cube. From the biggest land grab in history to the smallest one no one asked for. Number 17. Tucked away on 9.8 acres in the Nevada desert is the Republic of Molossia. It's even got its own flag. So dream big, kids. Even you can turn your backyard into a country. President Kevin Baugh opens this country up to tourism between April and October. There you can swing through the government's offices and take a look at the local currency, and even learn about the naval fleet, which is less battleships and destroyers and more inflatable pool toys. So Nevada's got its own tiny country, but California's got a place where people disappear entirely. Number 16. Looking to lie low? Try Slab City in Imperial County, California. You just have to brave the scorching Sonora Desert. There used to be a military base here during World War II. After the war, all that remained was the slabs of concrete. Slowly, people moved in and turned it into a settlement. No taxes, no rent, no rules. Sounds great until you realize there's also no electricity, no plumbing, and no trash pickup. It's popular with homeless people, but also artists and survivalists. They call it the last free place, though you can bet the IRS is already drafting plans to prove them wrong. Slab City ditched the rules. These folks just rewrote them with a hymn book. Number 15. The Bible Belt isn't the only place with religion. Chicago has its own Jesus people. They're a legacy of the 1960s evangelical movement. The haircuts have changed, but the spirit hasn't. The community has between 100 and 450 members, and they hosted the Cornerstone Christian Music Festival from 1984 to 2012. Think Woodstock with fewer drugs and more hymns. These days, they're still going strong, based in a building that used to be the Chelsea Hotel. Room service comes with a sermon. America's full of believers. Some follow Christ. Others, they follow Caesar. Number 14. Go to Maine, and you'll find people clinging to the old Roman religion and values. It's called Nova Roma, and they're properly serious about it. There's a Senate, magistrates, and a legislature made up of members to pass laws. It even has its own coins. No empire is complete without currency featuring someone in a toga. And like a true empire, its citizens are scattered around the globe. But the headquarters sits proudly in the Pine Tree State, proving all roads now lead to Maine. Rome wasn't built in a day, but Agloe, New York? That one was built in an afternoon. Number 13. Mapmaker General Drafting was one of the top dogs in its business. When it made its map of New York, it dreamed up the fictional town of Agloe. It wasn't real, just a clever way to catch copycats. Their own little DMCA before the internet. And it worked. Sort of. Rival Rand McNally published a map with Agloe on it, and General Drafting threatened to sue. But then Rand McNally's lawyers pointed out there actually was a store at Agloe. Someone had built one right where the fake town was marked. So a fake town became real. At least until the store closed and Agloe vanished again. It's probably the only place in history that got gaslighted into existence by cartographers. So after creating a fake town, America moved on to something even stranger, a private island nation. Number 12. Welcome to North Dumpling Island off the New York and Connecticut coast. It was the personal micronation of Dean Kamen, the guy who invented the Segway. Proof that you really can have too much money and too much free time. It has everything a nation should want, right? There's a flag, a national anthem, an exact replica of Stonehenge for artistic taste, and a lighthouse for navigation. That includes the country's navy of one boat. Small, sure, but it gets great gas mileage. But North Dumpling doesn't have its own language, though. Go to Milwaukee for that. Number 11. There's a little-known kingdom in the United States. At least, that's what Milwaukee local Robert Madison says. In 1979, the 14-year-old founded the Kingdom of Tolosa. The word comes from the Finnish inside the house, which checks out. The entire territory was his bedroom. Over time, it expanded into the city, and now parts of Milwaukee are the Greater Tolosan area. It has a population of 585 registered individuals, and they're all supposed to speak a new language that has its own newspaper. No word on whether His Majesty still has to clean his room, but let's hope the royal decree covers Laundry Day. Now we know that the US has done everything from bargain shopping for Alaska to inventing fake countries. But the top 10, that's where things officially go off the rails. Number 10. America once had an emperor. Well, sort of. Joshua Abraham Norton, a San Francisco businessman who hit it big in 1849, just as the city was exploding with opportunity. But a bad deal and years of lawsuits wiped him out completely. So he decided the best solution was to declare himself Emperor of the United States. In 1859, he issued a royal proclamation announcing his new title. From the top floor of a 3-story boarding house, hardly the Colosseum, but everyone has to start somewhere, Emperor Norton I went on to issue edicts, abolish Congress, and even print his own currency, which, to be fair, local businesses sometimes honored. No one took it seriously, but at least he was a local celebrity. He'd probably be huge on TikTok today and have his own merch line. But as odd as Norton was, even his decrees couldn't match some of the real laws out there. Number 9. Thinking of catching a little rainwater? Check your local laws. It's not as simple as putting out a bucket. In Arkansas, you can only collect rain outdoors, not for drinking, and only if it's designed by a licensed engineer. It's hydration with paperwork. In California, it has to follow the State Water Resource Board's requirements, which sounds about as fun as reading them. And it doesn't stop there. Colorado, Georgia, Illinois, Nevada, North Carolina, Ohio, Oregon, Rhode Island, Texas, Utah, Vermont, Virginia, and Washington all have rainwater collection regulations. Nothing says land of the free like needing government permission to use the weather. First, the government tells you how to use the rain. Now, it's telling you who gets to fill your tank. Number 8. In every state, it's legal to pump your own gas. Every state but one. New Jersey. There you've got to sit tight and let a gas station attendant do it for you. So if you're ever road tripping through the Garden State, resist the urge to grab the pump. You'll just cause mild anxiety for everyone. America may not agree on who pumps the gas, but it definitely agrees that daylight savings is the worst. Number 7. In the US, there's one thing Americans can all agree on. Everyone hates changing the clocks twice a year. Now imagine the pain of Mexico Beach, Florida, where it's a full-time identity crisis. The Panhandle is in the Central Time Zone, and the Peninsula is in the Eastern. But Mexico Beach? It sits right on that border. Imagine trying to schedule anything when your neighbor's 2 p.m. is your 3 p.m. And it's not alone. There's College Corner on the Indiana-Ohio border, Clovis, New Mexico near the border with Texas, and plenty more towns where a 5-minute drive means jumping an hour into the future, or the past. Some towns can't agree on the time. Others can't agree on which state they're in. Number 6. Head to Bristol, Tennessee, and you'll find State Street. It's an ordinary-looking road that happens to double as the border between Tennessee and Virginia. Back in 1852, Joseph Anderson bought land on both sides to build a railroad. He then founded the town of Bristol on the Tennessee side.
Not to be outdone, Samuel Goodson started his own settlement right across the street and named after himself, Goodsonville. A bold act. The ego trip didn't last. By 1890, Goodsonville decided to rebrand as Bristol too. Today, the two Bristols are technically separate cities with different taxes, laws, and even flags marking the state line. It's twin cities, just with a shared main street and a mild case of identity crisis. Two towns sharing one street is pretty messy. Try two states sharing one post office. Number 5. Thinking of mailing a package from the Texarkana Post Office and Federal Building? Congratulations, you've just crossed state lines. The border between Texas and Arkansas runs right through the middle of it. It's the kind of bureaucratic oddity only America could produce. State Line Avenue separates the two states, and the post office building is smack in the center of that avenue. So technically, when you drop off your mail, half your letter's in Texas and the other half's in Arkansas. No wonder USPS is slow. So after splitting mail across state lines, why stop there? America went ahead and split a swimming pool too. Number 4. Back in 1926, the Calneva Lodge and Casino opened on the shores of Lake Tahoe, the kind of place where movie stars and mobsters shared cocktails and plausible deniability. The pool was a highlight of the resort. A crisp white line ran straight through the middle, not marking the deep end, but the state border between California and Nevada. You could literally float between two states without ever leaving the water. Perfect for anyone indecisive about gambling laws or tax brackets. The lodge closed in 2013, so a cross-border swim is off the table. For now, you'll just have to choose a state the old-fashioned way, by driving there, not dog-paddling across it. Now we know America has its own emperor, nobody likes changing the clocks, and state lines don't care about your Amazon packages. And that's the more normal stuff. We've hit the top 3 insane facts. Ready to see how weird it gets? Number 3. Some places like Chesapeake in Virginia take Halloween seriously. So seriously that it's illegal for anyone over the age of 14 to go trick-or-treating. So if you're planning to go door-to-door for free sugar, maybe stick to handing out the candy instead. Or just go as something really scary, like a responsible adult. Paying taxes. From outlawing costumes to outlawing car sales, America really knows how to ruin things. Number 2. Michigan was the revving engine of the motor industry, which makes this law feels like it was written by someone allergic to irony. It's illegal to buy or sell a car on Sunday. It's supposed to promote rest and religious observance. So if you're feeling spontaneous and want to buy a car, you'll just have to wait until Monday. In Michigan, even the cars need a day off to recharge their batteries, spiritually and physically. So you can't buy a car on Sunday in Michigan. And in Alabama, you can't even crack a smile. Number 1. In Alabama, there's a number of weird law lists. And many claim it's illegal to wear a fake mustache in a church, just in case it causes laughter. Nothing says sin like a misdemeanor for comedy facial hair. The idea is to prevent anything that might interrupt the spirit of the occasion. No word on what happens if your mustache is real, though. Hopefully, divine judgment doesn't come down to grooming choices. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more videos like this, then please consider subscribing and turn on notifications. Really does make a difference. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time on MatPack.